right. For those who have joined us, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We're excited to get started, but we're going to give it just wait a minute or two as people join the live stream here. We have a great group of panelists here. Hopefully you can see them all. You will hear from them soon, but it takes just a little bit of time for everyone to get in, so I am stalling for time for people right now. Let's see. Well, we're going to welcome you to our value of higher education discussion. We're waiting just another minute as more folks are joining in here today. You'll get to see some of our panelists here. And maybe I'll just start. My guess is we've given some information out on people, but I will talk about the panelists who are joining us for this day. So I'm going to start here in alphabetical order. First, we are joined by Austin Lane. He is the Chancellor at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. They offer more than 300 degree programs, including bachelor's, master's, and doctoral programs. Dr. Lane became Chancellor of SIU in July 2020, his latest in a variety of leadership roles in higher education. He holds a BA from Langston University, a master's in human relations from the University of Oklahoma, and a doctorate in higher education administration from the University of Alabama. Second, we're joined by Curt Oldfield, president of Spoon River College, a public community college in Canton, Illinois, which offers a wide variety of career training and college transfer programs. Curt has served as the president of Spoon River since July 2012. He was a first-generation college student at Spoon River College, and afterward earned his BA in agricultural education from Illinois State, and is currently completing a doctorate in higher education administration. We are also joined by Ginger Ostro, the executive director of the Illinois Board of Higher Education, where she just completed a strategic plan for higher education in Illinois. Ginger holds a BA in politics, economics, rhetoric, and law from the University of Chicago, and a master's in public policy, health, and human services from Harvard's Kennedy School. Last but certainly not least, we're joined by Katie Stewart, Illinois State Representative for the 112th District. Representative Stewart is a full-time legislator and has been a representative since 2017. She is also the chair of the Illinois House Higher Education Committee. And she has a BA in math from Rutgers and a master's in science and mathematics from Southern Illinois University. So Representative Stewart, Executive Director Ostro, President Oldfield, and Chancellor Lane, I want to thank you very much for your service in joining us here today. And with that, I think we are probably had enough time for people to everyone be joining us. So good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here with you today to host today's panel on the value of higher education. I'm Illinois State Treasurer Michael Frericks, and as Treasurer, I serve as the state's Chief Investment Officer and oversee the management and investment of approximately $40 billion in assets on behalf of the state, local governments, and the citizens of Illinois. Among this portfolio is approximately $16 billion in college savings assets, the money that hundreds of thousands of Illinois families have saved for their future education. As treasurer, I serve as trustee and administrator for the state's two 529 college savings programs, Bright Start and Bright Directions. Today, hundreds of thousands of Illinois families are saving for their future education through Bright Start or Bright Directions. Since being elected treasurer in 2014, I've worked hard to make these programs some of the best in the country. Bright Start, for example, is one of the highest rated, most affordable 529 plans in the country. Bright Start and Bright Directions are called 529 programs after Section 529 of the IRS Code that allows states to administer tax-advantaged college savings vehicles on behalf of their residents. And May 29 is 529 Day, and celebrated by 529 college savings plans across the country. It's a day to raise awareness about 529 college savings programs and the value of higher education. So as we gather today for this 2021 edition of 529 Day, our society is reopening, and we're reflecting on the many effects of the economic and social dislocations of the past 15 months. This pandemic and the economic and social pain it caused has raised so many important issues for higher education. Consider, for example, during the pandemic, many workers with higher levels of education were able to transition to remote work and remain employed. In contrast, many workers with lower levels of education experienced furlough or unemployment. The pandemic has also seen increased demand for certain skilled tradesmen, logistics workers, and others. Meanwhile, the closing of schools and move to online learning has opened new discussions about the value of education, the cost of it, and how to best finance it. After past recessions, we saw demand for higher education soar as citizens sought to retrain, gain new credentials, and enter new types of work. I expect the story will be much the same after this pandemic is behind us. With all this in mind, 529 days seemed like an opportune time to discuss the value of higher education and how the landscape of higher education may be changing in Illinois. And for our discussion, I've invited a distinguished group of panelists who represent a wide diversity of perspectives and roles within the higher education sector in Illinois, including college leaders, statewide administrators, and elected representatives. Now, we've assembled a great wealth of expertise and experience on this panel, and I'm looking very, very forward to our discussion. So I did do a brief introduction of our four panelists. Hopefully, if you have other questions about them, you can find a lot of this online. I want to thank you all for joining us for today's discussion. So let's dive into some questions. And this one will be open to all four of our panelists. As the administrator of Illinois' 529 college savings plans, I regularly speak with families about higher education and the costs of it and how to save from it. For me, this is personal, not just professional. I grew up in a small town, Gifford, Illinois, a small farming community of approximately 800 people in Champaign County. My parents didn't attend college, and their parents didn't attend high school. I was the first in my family to attend college, and with the termination, I graduated from Yale University. And when I was growing up, my parents worked hard but didn't have the money to save for college. When I was accepted to college, it was unclear at first whether I'd be able to attend because my parents felt they couldn't afford it. And now, some 25 years later, I'm the administrator of the Illinois College Savings Plans, and I'm working to help hundreds of thousands of Illinois families save for their future education. Education has been immensely impactful in my life. So to start, I'd love to hear from each of you about the role education has played in your own lives. Let's begin with Representative Stewart. So what is your personal story and what role has higher education played in your life?
Well, thank you, and thank you for including me on this distinguished panel. It's really an honor to be chosen. And I, by virtue of my work on the higher education committee here in the House of Illinois. I'm from a family where education was preached as, it wasn't a question of, are you going to go to college? Or when are you going to go to college? It was where. And I'm kind of an opposite story to Treasurer Frericks, where I have multi-generations before me that are college educated. But I did see, friends of mine in high school they were the first ones in their families. And when they were frantically filling out every possible application for every possible scholarship to get $100 here and $200 there, because they got into their dream school, but they didn't know if they were going to be able to afford it. And so I've seen those stories. My career prior to this, I've been an educator my whole life. So I've taught mathematics to middle school, to high school, and at the college level as well too. So obviously I'm a lover of education. I'm pretty much married into a family full of educators as well too. And I can't emphasize the value of education. Higher education, it's not only what it does for the individual, but what higher education provides for us as a society. The research, the innovation, the changes that we see are all the result of the work that goes on, especially at our state institutions. So I can speak about the value of higher ed all day, but I want to let everyone else on the panel have an opportunity as well too.
Great. Representative, thank you very much. Chancellor Lane.
Yeah, thank you so much, Treasurer, for having me here, and hello to everyone on the call. The value of higher education, I tell you what, it's changed my life. It's changed my family's life. My mother, grandmother did not have the opportunity to go to college. And so all of their hopes and dreams were placed on my shoulders. so I could be the one in the family to do it. So I not only having the pressure of going to class every day and doing all those things to take care of college, I knew that my stories back home had to be positive ones when my mother asked me about my grades or how I was doing, because I was carrying the hopes and dreams of, again, my entire family. So it has allowed me to go to places that I could have never imagined being in. It's been allowed my family to be in a position where we don't have to struggle as much as we did when I was growing up. And so, again, like Representative Stewart, I could talk forever about the value of education, but for me, it's been a personal journey of being able to do some things that, again, my mother and others were not able to do. And I'm just glad to be able to represent them in that fashion.
Chancellor, thank you very much. Let's go on to President Oldfield.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Treasurer, for the invitation to join this panel today. Hello to all of the participants who are joining us, and thanks to my fellow panelists for sharing their stories and your expertise. I certainly enjoy learning from each of you as we go through this afternoon. For me, as you said, Treasurer Ferguson, in my introduction, I was a first-generation college student. My father worked at a manufacturing facility in East Peoria that builds bulldozers, and he had a small farm, and my dream always was to be able to take over that farm, and that dream never came to realization. And so I realized I had to have a plan B, and I was fortunate Spoon River College was close. I grew up in Farmington, Illinois, and was able to drive back and forth to Canton, but that didn't come without challenges. I worked 3 jobs while I was a student at Spoon River College, and then learned that my passion for education. I learned that I wanted to be a teacher, wanted to help others, and my connection with agriculture and teaching came together, and I was fortunate to be able to get my teaching degree. Taught a few years at Roseville and got to coach and teach, and so it's a unique experience. You really get to know students, you get to know their families when you're in that teaching and coaching role. Ag teachers are a little different than some of our other teachers because of FFA. You get to spend a lot of time in a vehicle with those students traveling up and down the road, going to FFA events. And so you really start to develop the understanding of how impactful the classroom and co-curricular activities are. And I was fortunate to be able to carry that through into my college teaching experience and be able to share that passion with those students, to be able to help them see that higher education is a door opener, and it really is a life-changing opportunity. And as Treasurer Ferricks was explaining, Bright Start and the 529 plans that he's a trustee for, it kind of lit that light bulb for me that higher education is an investment. Just like where we ask parents to invest dollars, the students who go through higher ed are investing in themselves and their families in the future. And so I really appreciate the work that Illinois has done with the 529 plans to be able to give more opportunities to students to invest in themselves, to better themselves, their region, and the entire state of Illinois. So thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to sharing some other higher ed experiences, but truly as a door opening opportunity.
Good diversity of backgrounds here. Ginger, can you tell us about your path? Oh, Ginger, I think you're muted. There we go.
Okay, thank you. I have double mute, so I wasn't sure if I had gotten them both, so apologies for that. So I think I'm going to sort of slide in the middle here in terms of stories. I also came from a family with education in my background. My dad was a community college instructor. He taught welding at a local community college, so very familiar with the community college system. But I followed a very traditional path. I went to college right out of high school, and completed in 4 years, and really followed that traditional path. And so what I wanted to highlight is an experience when I started working at Governor State University, which is one of our public universities that serves what we used to call non-traditional students, students that didn't follow that path right from high school. And for me, working there, it really opened my eyes to realizing the many paths that people take to college and through college, and really how we have to make sure that our institutions are providing those opportunities for students, no matter how they enter college, when they enter college, and that we're providing services and support. So I think for me, having that experience both opened my eyes and made me also realize the real power of higher education to help people transform their lives. Women coming back to school after having families to try and get additional skills to upgrade their families and opportunities. Like, those things to me were so incredibly powerful. And I know that that's what shaped my focus on higher education for my career. So just some examples of things of different ways that higher education can impact lives.
Great. Well, Ginger, thank you very much for that. Let's move on. The pandemic has changed so much about American life in general, how we work, how we learn, how we think about the future. And although the pandemic has brought great changes, I believe the future will continue to reward workers who have some form of education beyond high school. It also appears that Illinois families themselves believe this. Last year, the Illinois 529 College Savings Program saw a record number of new accounts, and families contributed more to their college savings accounts than ever before. So let me ask each of you this. As you think about the pandemic and its effects, what lessons do you draw for the value of higher education? And this one, we'll start with Chancellor Lane.
Yeah, I think at least here on our campus, it's really allowed us to think much more creatively in how we assist those families that are out there working so hard to invest their dollars in higher education. One of the things before this call, Curt and I were talking about was some of the pipelines and pathways to make sure that students can get access to higher education and do it at a way that's not going to put them in debt. To make sure the classes that they are taking are going to transfer to those four-year institutions and those credits will be accepted, and that those students, as you heard Ginger talk about, that they can finish in 4 years. And so that we really take care of all the hard work that's being done by those families to invest in the 529 plan, to make sure that at the end there's a really good return on investment, and that's a degree. And so I think the pandemic has caused us to think even more about the hard work that's being done by families all over the state, and to be very sensitive to the dollars that they are really, in some cases, working 2 and 3 jobs to try and save up those dollars and put in those plans that eventually are going to come to our universities or our colleges. And so, being very respectful of that. And I think we were doing that before the pandemic, but I think this has really caused us to think even more critically about it.
All right. Representative Stewart, you want to hop in on this one?
Sure. I think it unfortunately maybe had to propel a lot of instruction into a whole new realm and world. But I think it's really, you can think of it as an opportunity to have really reimagined how you can deliver that. I think back to, God, if I had been teaching a calculus course, that would have been rough to figure out how to transition to it. But I've been able to kind of virtually visit a couple of college classes, and it's been mind-blowing the way that they've been able to structure things. And so I think it's really opening. We talk a lot about, the access and affordability of higher education. And I have to commend our universities. I'm a little partial to SIU since SIUE is right in my backyard, and that's where I got my master's. But knowing the support they gave their students and their faculty to make those transitions, and like I said, I think we're kind of opening up a whole new world of what's available. I took the opportunity, the college in California was offering some remote things that they had never offered remotely, and I was able to listen in on these fascinating lectures. And so just that idea, I think, is really just kind of mind-blowing where we could go from here.
All right. We have a lot of good questions to ask in a limited amount of time. I'm going to switch just a little bit here. 529 college savings accounts can be used for many forms of higher education, including 4-year schools, 2-year schools, vocational, technical programs, and apprenticeships. And the good news, that Illinois families are saving more for higher education than they ever have before. In the past 6 years, we've more than doubled the total amount saved by Illinois families in their 529 accounts. However, we also know that savings are just one part of the equation when it comes to financing college. So let me ask our two college leaders, how are families financing their college expenses in your institution? And we'll start with President Oldfield.
Thank you, Treasurer. You know, we see families using federal Pell money, state of Illinois MAP funds to be able to help cover a lot of those expenses, but also, you know, reliance on federal loans. And so the advantage of saving early is reducing that dependency on federal loans as time goes along. So really planning for that. And you know, oftentimes we think about parents saving for their own children, but we've even started to see where grandparents, instead of giving small gifts when the grandchildren are young, we're starting to see those grandparents save for that grandchild's college early on. And you know, what a wise move for those grandparents to be able to do that early. And so they get the maximum amount of interest to gain off of that investment and be able to see a lifelong impact from a birthday gift or a you know, a celebratory opportunity. And so we've seen the entire family unit start to support students as they're going through school. Back to what you were talking about, Treasurer, that really importance of higher education and how that can change. So we're seeing a lot of variety, but I also have to say, the amount of alumni support that we have had to our foundation for scholarships continues to improve. And so we see our own alums giving back so that Spoon River College students in the future may have it just a little bit easier than what they had it. And so it's neat to be able to see the entire community support these students who may be fresh out of high school or, as Ginger talked about, somebody who may be coming back to school after sitting out for a while and raising their family. It's great to see that community support. And this is just one example of how communities are rallying around to highlight the importance of higher education.
I feel like I'm getting to know you guys better. So Curt, thank you very much. And I'll switch to first names here. Austin, how about SIU?
Yeah, I think to answer that question on how they're financing or how families are financing their college education, I would just say very creatively. When you start thinking about, as Curt mentioned, with family members and moms, dads, aunts, uncles, you name it, you have an entire generation of families there trying to cover the cost of their son or daughter's education in very creative ways, knowing the cost of higher education and really trying to make sure that they can afford not only the first year, but year 2, year 3, year 4, you know, all the way through is critically important. And families are thinking about that. Curt also mentioned, you know, we have skin in the game too. Here at SIU, we just stood up a Saluki commitment, which really for families that are 63,500 and below, we cover basically their tuition portion to make it a little easier. And so we share in the financing and trying to help those students through those 4 years. Curt also talked about scholarships, you know, really getting creative when we put award packages together to make sure students know that there's several different ways that we can help out. You know, Ginger will tell you whether it's Aim High or the different things that the state is doing to help keep students here at home in the state of Illinois. All those things are, I think, pretty creative, and those partnerships are formed with those families to try and make sure their students can get from orientation to graduation. And so we're trying to do our part here to help those families do that so they're not discouraged and not feel like higher education is out of their reach.
Awesome, thank you. The landscape of higher education is changing rapidly these days, and with many new innovative educational offerings and many new efforts to help all families of all backgrounds access them. So Ginger, you recently crafted a strategic plan for the Illinois Board of Higher Education. And let me ask you, as post-secondary programs evolve across all institutions, can you share some of the different pathways the students are taking? And are there any trends you can share?
Great. Well, thank you very much. As the treasurer mentioned, we have we're about to complete a strategic planning process that we launched last fall in partnership with the Illinois Community College Board and the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. We're three agencies that provide coordination, oversight, and student support for the higher education system in the state. Through that process, I just have to say we had really broad community engagement and participation. We started out with a survey of community stakeholders about why higher education was important to them and what were the most important things to focus on. We had over 10,000 responses to that survey. We also had well over 200 people involved in work groups as we developed the strategic plan. And all of it was focused on how do we have a higher education ecosystem that ensures that individuals, families, and communities can thrive. So really that's the core idea that we've been talking about and the value of higher education. It's both for what the individual can have, but what we as families and communities and as a state and a world see as the benefits. Through that process, we identified three goals and have a set of strategies that we'll be implementing to achieve those. And our three goals, the first one is around equity. We know that we've seen, and we were just talking a moment ago about the impact of the pandemic on low-income families and families of color and how that's been manifested in higher education. And it's not just the pandemic, but there's historical challenges and gaps that we see in the rate at which institutions admit and help students persist and complete, students of color, first-generation students, low-income students, and even adult students. We know that the paths there are challenging. So our first goal is how do we close those gaps and make sure we have equity and access, persistence, and completion for all of our students in the state. The second goal is around sustainability, and we were just talking about affordability in higher education. How do we make sure that our higher ed system is sustainable, it's affordable for individuals, but also our institutions need stability. We need to make sure we're providing adequate funding, because if we don't have that, then how are we supporting students if they don't have the resources to make sure that we can close those equity gaps? And finally, the recognition, and I think, Treasurer, you mentioned this early in your opening remarks, higher education is about growth of the economy. We have to prepare the future workforce. We have innovation, we have research and discovery. All of those things contribute to a vibrant state of Illinois, to the state thriving. So as we looked at the strategic plan and we looked forward and said, what do we have to focus on? How do we have to evolve with our institutions, in our student assistance, in our funding of, financing of the system of higher education? It's in those three areas, and really to look at the students that need to be served are, as we mentioned, our first generation, our low-income students, our students of color, our adult students, rural students, making sure that every student has an opportunity and the supports they need to access and complete higher education. So as we look forward and what's evolving and what programs we need, it's really to achieve those three goals and how the higher ed system can help support and sustain that.
Great. Ginger, thank you. Representative Stewart, you chair the Higher Education Committee in the Illinois House of Representatives. You're also a full-time legislator and regularly hear from your constituents about their needs and their concerns and recommendations for higher education in the state. So what are some challenges and opportunities you are hearing from your constituents?
I think nobody be surprised. Challenges are, it's affording education. We have a lot of innovative programs. We have a lot of innovative scholarship opportunities for people going into certain areas of the workforce. Navigating it is sometimes challenging and finding out about those, but those things do exist. I was really excited. I thank Austin for mentioning the Aim High program that we can use to, assist those students, keep our own Illinois students going to our own Illinois institutions, and that investment that we've been making in those students since kindergarten, or hopefully in some cases pre-K. We get to reap the benefits of it with them in our higher education system, and then hopefully keeping them here as citizens. The challenge is that I will say that I've had discussions with folks about saving for school. The fact that some people are leery of a 529 because they worry, well, what happens if my kid doesn't go? And so trying to educate people on that it's not limited to tuition at SIU or the U of I, and the multitude of programs and places where it can be used, I think is really important to make sure that parents know it's never going to be a wasted investment in terms of putting that money in a 529. to use it towards post-secondary and higher education.
Yes, if people have money in a 529 and they don't need it there, they have lots of options. It can be transferred to another child. It can be transferred to a grandchild. It can be used by the account holder if they want to go take some classes in retirement. If the student receives a scholarship, they can take that money out, an equal amount, without any penalties or tax liability. So it's really a very flexible vehicle. So I want to thank each of you for the great input and discussion we've had today. I want to give you some time, though, to close with one final question. As you think about your role and where you sit in the landscape of higher education in Illinois, what is some parting advice you might offer to families who are contemplating, saving for, and planning for higher education? Let's see here. We'll go with Curt first.
Well, thank you. And thanks again for this opportunity to join the panel today. And thanks to our panelists for sharing your time and experience. For me, the advice is to start early. I mean, I think what Representative Stewart was sharing with some of her constituents is that to start early, develop that flexibility. I think if we learned anything during COVID pandemic is to remain flexible and responsive. And so I think this gives your student, your family member, yourself the opportunity to invest in yourself, to improve yourself as an individual or your child's future, but also it's an investment in the state of Illinois. Ginger stated, we're really talking about the future of our state, and part of that future comes from an investment in higher education, having the diversity of workforce in the future so we can retain employers here, but also bring new employers to the area and promote entrepreneurism throughout the state of Illinois. So continue to think about that future. It seems daunting to think that far ahead, but before you know it, it will be here. So again, I appreciate this opportunity.
Curt, thank you for joining us. You mentioned Ginger. Let's go to Ginger next.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here as well. And just to echo, I think they're absolutely starting early and thinking about college early works when you're thinking about your family and your children, but also as adults. Just to pick up on the theme that I started with, there's opportunities to go back no matter where you are in your point in your life, and to explore all the opportunities. We have a huge variety of institutions in Illinois. We're incredibly fortunate for that. That provide a whole array of credentials and degrees that can meet people's needs. So I think really looking for opportunities, checking, and identifying those resources that are going to be available at no matter what point you're looking to go to school. So always best to start early, think about college, but do think about it as that investment in yourself, and think about the institutions that are there and the many opportunities that there are for support and resources to help you save and afford college in Illinois.
Ginger, I said one last question, but I want to throw something in. You mentioned assistance. Anything you want to share about Aim High?
So there's a couple. I mean, Chancellor Lane mentioned this. Illinois is really incredibly well known for the Monetary Award Program, which is a large program for need-based aid that is provided to students at any age. So that's one opportunity that the state funds for higher education. There's also a program called Aim High, which is for public universities. Each university is able to set up a program to help recruit students to stay in Illinois, to attend the public universities, and provide scholarship support for them. So looking at our public universities and seeing what the opportunities are through Aim High is really just a new and terrific opportunity that we have here in the state.
Great, thank you, Ginger. Austin, Ginger had referenced you.
Yeah, well, thanks to everyone for Treasurer. Thank you for having me here, and it's been a pleasure being on the panel with everyone here. So I tell you what, I think back 23 years ago when my daughter was being born. Luckily, I jumped right into a 529 plan. My daughter just graduated college 2 weeks ago. I would have never imagined that was probably one of the best investments that I could have made for her and for me. And so that, the advice I would have is that time goes fast, and it may not feel like it, but when you're making those early investments, before you know it, they'll pay off, and you'll say, wow, my kid's already college age and ready to go to school, and you will feel a lot more secure when you're sending your kid away, and then you'll feel better in your wallet once they finish up and you didn't have to find all the money to send them there. So it's an investment, and I think it's one that is the best gift you could probably ever give anyone in your family that you love. And so that'd be my advice to the audience.
Great. Austin, thank you for that. And congratulations on the graduation in your life, and congratulations on the extra money in your wallet each month.
That's what's important.
Katie, any thoughts on that question, or any thoughts on legislation that's coming that our viewers might be interested in?
Well, sure. I could talk about that all day, but I really kind of just wanted to give a message of, persevere. It's always going to be worth it. Persevere as the parent, helping your child navigate I know they're technically not our children typically when they're in college, but we all know that we still think of them that way. Perseverance, and kind of a plug for fellow educators. We're all in that field because we care about people and we want to help them. There are people who want to help you navigate the challenge of affording college and making it through. We want to provide those support systems that are going to get you those degrees. It's the ultimate goal that everybody wants you to achieve. So I just want to encourage people to reach out, because there are people who they have their hands out to help you, and they just need you to grab for it to help pull you through. And that's what I'm so privileged to be able to do here in the Capitol when I'm working every day, is to kind of work on those programs that are going to provide those supports, financial and otherwise, for students that are getting their way through.
Right. Yeah. A lot of those students have their hand out. They need help. But our panelists here are all people who are willing to give a hand up and help out. And I want to thank and commend Chancellor Lane, Representative Stewart, Executive Director Ostro, and President Oldfield for your leadership and for your ongoing efforts to prepare our next generation of students, workers, and leaders. As we are just about at 529 day, I'd also like to part by encouraging all families in Illinois to save for their future education, to put their kids on a pathway to success. As today's discussion has addressed, education can be a powerful tool to change lives. Be it a career program at Spoon River College, a master's at SIU, or one of the many other options available across our state. Through Bright Start and Bright Directions, families can save for their future education in a program that's affordable and is highly rated. In addition, up to $10,000 in contributions to an Illinois 529 college savings program can be deducted from your Illinois income taxes, or up to $20,000 if you're married and filing jointly. For anyone who is interested, you can learn more at brightstart.com. So I want to thank you all for joining us today for this important conversation. And I wish all of you a fun and safe Memorial Day holiday. Thanks for joining.